This video is going to be another example of using the for loop and the if decision structure in Visual Basic. So let's take a look at some of this code. The first example I have here is essentially going to count the number of zeros in a particular range on a spreadsheet. Let's go back and take another quick look at that spreadsheet for just a minute. You'll notice that the range I have selected here is row 3, column 2 through row 15, column 2, and there are a number of zeros in here and some other numbers, and it's just kind of random. So again, the first thing we normally do in a lot of our code is to declare a bunch of variables that we're going to use for our program. So let's just kind of run through the variables quickly. I need a variable to count my zeros, and again, give your variables good names. Variable names should generally start with a lowercase letter, and notice how I capitalized the subsequent word in this variable name zero count. I also need to specify in my program what the row number is of what I'm currently on. This is going to be a value that's going to change as the loop executes. So row number is going to go from, let's say, 3 to 4 to 5. Column number, of course, is the column number that I'm currently checking. In this case, the column number will always be the same value, but that doesn't always have to be true. I have a start row variable to store the starting row number and an end row variable for storing the ending row number. So these statements simply do my initializations of all these values that are necessary. So I want to search through column 2. I want to start at row 3. I want to end at row 15. And I want to initialize my zero counter to 0 because I, of course, don't want to have any value in that zero counter before I get started. So then I create my for loop. Now again, remember, every for loop is going to look very similar. It's going to have a next at the end of it. But we have our for, and then we have our variable for the controlling value of our for loop. And here it's going to be row number. We're going to initialize that row number to start row, which in this case, of course, is 3. And we want it to go through end row, which is 15. So we say to end row. In this case, it's going to be 15. And then all we needed to do there is we needed to check every one of the cells in turn that we visit to see if that cell value is equal to 0. So this is our test then for our if-then statement, to check to see if the row number we're currently on and the column number that we've specified is equal to 0. If that's true, we execute the body of this for loop, and notice again how it's indented. So we say 0 count equals 0 count plus 1. Basically, this takes the current value that's in 0 count, adds 1 to it, of course, and then takes that resulting value and assigns it to this memory location again. So it's going to overwrite what was originally in that memory location. And again, remember your end if. And so here's our next row number, and it just goes around and does that for as many rows as we have specified. And finally, then we have this message box statement that comes up and tells us how many zeros were found. So I'm just going to go ahead and run this program and see how many zeros it finds. So I'll click run, and it tells me that the number of zeros found was 5. And of course we can check, see if it worked just by counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It found 5 zeros, so our code seems to be working properly. Now I strongly recommend that you type in this piece of code and actually step through it with the F8 command so that you can actually watch the code execute and kind of see if it's doing what you expect. This next example is a little simpler in some respects, but it's going to use user input rather than the cells on the spreadsheet. So all this is going to do is it's going to add up all the whole numbers up to some maximum value that the user inputs. So let's take a look at this one. It's quite simple. We have a variable storage location for the user's input. We ask the user what the maximum number is that they want to sum up. We need a variable for our for loop, so I just call that counter. You can call it whatever you want. You make up your variable names, but they should be meaningful. We have to have a sum to hold the sum of all the numbers as we add them up. Here's our initialization. We want to set sum to 0 to start with. And here's our for loop. Now the for loop basically is going to use the for loop variable. You can just remember what you used, what you call your for loop variable. And it's going to start at 1, and it's going to go up to max number, the user's input. And here's another similar statement that you saw before, where we take our sum variable, we retrieve the value in the sum variable, we add the current counter, which is the value 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we store that back into the sum, so it overwrites what was in sum. And then we simply message box out the sum of our numbers, from 1 to whatever the user input. So let me go ahead and I'll just run this one and we'll see what it does. So let's say that I enter 3 as a maximum number. Well, we know the sum of the numbers up to 3 should be 6, so that was pretty easy. Let's try something a little bit bigger. What if we type in 1,000? So let me run this. We'll type in the sum of all the numbers up to 1,000. Well, instantly it tells me that it's 500,500. Now you can do a little bit of a rough estimate in your head and probably figure that out. But it did it instantly. Notice that was pretty cool. Now you could probably type in quite a bit bigger number, but let's just leave it at that for now. So again, type in these programs and run them and play around with them and start getting a better sense for how the for loop works and how that if statement works. Thank you.